In the 4th century BC, a new and very different kind of sculpture emanated from the court of Alexander the Great. The lands he conquered adopted Greek art and culture as their own. That culture became known as Hellenistic, from a Greek term meaning in imitation of the Greeks. The Hellenistic period, from the death of Alexander in 323 BC to the rise of the Roman Empire in 31 BC, was one of innovation. Artists experimented with new styles, new subjects. Sculptors created dynamic portraits of powerful rulers and aimed for pathos, the Greek concept of appealing to the viewer's emotions and sympathies. Realistic portraiture expressing character and individuality was born.
Hellenistic sculptors came up with realistic, expressive portraiture that not only depicts what people look like from their outward appearance, but also carries emotional power. We see what they're thinking. And this was done primarily in bronze.
The Hellenistic age had its origins in an unlikely place. The rugged, mountainous region of Macedonia. Far to the north of the rival city-states that had defined the Greek classical age in the 5th century BC. Athenians considered the Macedonians to be uncultured and semi-barbaric. But they underestimated Philip II, Macedonia's king. Philip forged a united Greece and reorganized its disparate forces into an army capable of facing its enemies. Philip was assassinated in 336 BC, but he had prepared his son well. Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle and schooled in the arts of war by his father's most trusted officers. Cunning, agile, physically powerful, and a superb horseman, Alexander was also a charismatic leader. After his father's death, Alexander trained his sights on Olympia. Home to the oldest of the Pan-Hellenic Games, established in 776 BC. Olympia was sacred to Zeus. A temple dedicated to him, later destroyed by an earthquake, dominated his sanctuary. Near it, Alexander oversaw the completion of an ornate monument to his family. Greece had never seen anything like the Philippian, a temple that honored not gods, but humans. The Philippian housed gold and ivory statues, now lost, of Philip, Alexander, and family. Over the next 10 years, Alexander created an empire. His unstoppable armies swept through the known and unknown world, pressing south through Asia Minor into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a god. Then eastward, crushing the Persian army of King Darius, who retreated in terror at the ferocity of the Greeks, a battle celebrated in ancient mosaics and poetry. And on to northern India. As he remapped the world, he also stamped his name on it. 17 Alexandrias were eventually founded in his empire. Alexander left troops and administrators to hold and Hellenize an empire encompassing 2 million square miles. The Hellenistic imprint pervaded the empire, from the architecture at Apamea in Syria to the coinage of India. Greek became the official language, and Greek literature and art became the dominant culture. Alexander's favorite sculptor was Lysippus. Lysippus and the artists who followed in his wake enlivened their works with a startling realism that contrasted with the serene, idealized statues of the classical period. In Corinth, the Greek city-state famed for its statues, excavations in 1901 uncovered an empty statue base bearing the inscription, "Lysippus made this." All that remains of his genius are later versions of his works, or works imitating his style, including the statuette of Alexander the Great. After Alexander's death at Babylon in 323 BC, his empire was divided into separate kingdoms by his generals. Greek culture, greatly admired, flourished, and the new rulers became patrons of the arts. At Pergamon, on the Aegean coast of what is now Turkey, the foundations of a once great city are all that remain. But its greatest monument, Hellenistic to the core, still survives. The Pergamon altar, transported to Berlin in the 19th century, shows an allegorical struggle between the Greek gods, representing order and civilization, and the giants, forces of evil and chaos. The sculpted marble reliefs epitomize high Hellenistic style, drama, movement, expressiveness, and pathos. The anguish of the defeated giants appeals to viewers' sympathies and contrasts with the serenity of the victorious gods. Hellenistic artists expanded their repertoire beyond images of gods, heroes, and mythic beings to portray the people of the Hellenistic world. And the medium sculptors favored for statues was bronze. Fine details that give a portrait its individuality could be captured more easily in bronze than marble.
Because bronze was initially modeled in clay and wax, there was a much greater possibility to model, mold, to use the hands to fashion soft skin, to make creases in the hair. Things that in marble would have to be laboriously chiseled with a hammer, with bronze could be worked by hand in the wax.
The furrowed eyebrows and melancholy demeanor of a boy lost in thought could be more easily worked in a clay or a soft material like wax. Bronze, with its greater tensile strength, also allowed sculptors to create dramatic poses beyond the reach of marble. Copper inlays were used for greater realism to emphasize eyebrows, nipples, and lips. Eyes could be fashioned from bone or marble. Colored stones served as pupils. Bronze darkens over time, and corrosion can change its color. The image of a bronze statue of Apollo in his temple on a 4th century BC vase gives a clue to the luminous appearance of newly cast sculptures. One writer commented that in the flickering light of oil lamps, the statues shone like gold. After the sculptor shaped the wax or clay model, reusable molds of the torso, head, and body parts were taken to cast multiple copies in bronze. The process of attaching the parts of the hollow sculpture is shown on a 5th century BC cup. A craftsman stokes the coals in the furnace as a boy in the background operates a bellows to fan the flames. Tools, including hammers and mallets used to join parts to the torso, hang from the wall. An artisan wearing an apron uses his mallet to attach a hand to a partly assembled statue of an athlete. The statue's head lies on the ground awaiting its turn. The other side of the cup shows two craftsmen smoothing the surface of a colossal sculpture of a warrior. Bronze casting could permit multiple, nearly identical copies.
In a workshop operation, there were elements and parts and stock parts maybe that were used and were assembled and were fashioned and refashioned and modified. And this allows you, for instance, to take one figure and then to alter that figure in the wax and make an addition with slightly modified version.
Unusually, 3 bronze versions of the same sculpture, 2 full-length and 1 head, survive. The subject is an athlete cleansing himself after an event. His hand would have held a strigil, a curved instrument used to scrape away the oil, sweat, and grime. The statues are believed to be based on a famous lost original, perhaps by Lysippus.
Lysippus produced a prodigious number of sculptures. We are told by the literary sources that Lysippus put a gold coin in a pot every time he made a sculpture, and when he died, there were 1,500 gold coins in that pot.
Bronzes were everywhere. Tucked under Mount Parnassus in the sanctuary of Apollo in Delphi, more than 3,000 sculptures stood. Delphi was home to the most important oracle in the ancient world. The sculptures, paid for by visitors, were gifts in honor of Apollo. The empty bases dotting the hillside still bear inscriptions made 2,000 years ago. The donor's name and expressions of hope or gratitude to Apollo for athletic successes, military victories, even a bountiful tuna catch. At Olympia, bases bear the telltale footprints of bronze statues of athletes memorialized for their victories in the Olympic Games. Athletes competed in the nude, their bodies glistening with oil. The contrasting lights and shadows of the sculpted muscles made them appear to ripple, a celebration of their power. The Games were competitions between individual athletes rather than team sports. Bronzes of victors lined the entrance to the stadium and stood in training facilities built for athletes. The palaestra offered changing rooms and an arena for boxers, wrestlers, and jumpers. The gymnasium catered to discus and javelin throwers and runners. Not all the sculptures celebrated winners. Statues of Zeus that stood along the route to the stadium entrance were financed by fines levied on athletes caught cheating, a penalty for violating their oath to Zeus. Inscriptions on the bases detailed their transgressions. In cities, bronze images of public figures and benevolent rulers were placed in marketplaces, theaters, and other public spaces. That practice was adopted by the Romans in Pompeii and cities throughout the Hellenistic world. And there were new kinds of subjects. Depictions of deities became less divine and more human. The demigod Heracles, known to Romans as Hercules, is shown not as a triumphant hero, but as weary from his labors as any mortal. Eros, the graceful adolescent god of love, became a sleepy, pudgy baby napping in the garden. Hellenistic artists portrayed people of all professions and ages. The withered face of an old man is framed by long hair and beard that proclaims his status as a poet or intellectual, unconcerned with petty vanities. Women made their debut as the subjects of portraits. The various characters of daily life, like this disabled artisan once leaning on a crutch, became worthy of sculpture. Subjects from distant parts, like this portrait of a North African, convey the diversity of the Hellenistic world. Sculptures of baby Eros riding bareback on lions found in southern Arabia reveal the long reach of Hellenistic culture and the playfulness that evolved in its waning years. By the 1st century BC, Rome dominated the Hellenistic world. The Roman elite decorated their villas on the Bay of Naples and elsewhere with sculptures in a variety of Greek styles. They included imitations of archaic and classical works, a reflection of the Roman interest in the Greek past. Often they were repurposed. A portrait of the sun god Apollo could end up as a lampstand or tray bearer. A tipsy Heracles, who once held a wine cup, ornamented a garden. Affluent Romans surrounded themselves with all things Greek. The House of the Faun in Pompeii included the mosaic floor, showing Alexander the Great's victory over Darius. Workshops throughout Italy supplied a steady stream of sculptures in Greek styles, snapped up by Romans eager to display their sophistication. The Roman defeat of the last Hellenistic dynasty at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC traditionally marks the end of the Hellenistic era. But Imperial Rome never lost its interest in the art and culture of Greece. Hellenistic bronzes are rare today. They were ripped off their pedestals, sometimes leaving remnants, and melted down to be recast as coins, weapons, or new works of art. Others were lost in shipwrecks. The seas surrounding Greece and its neighbors, often deceptively tranquil, could turn deadly. The once commanding statue of a man was found in pieces off the coast of Italy in 1992, part of a sunken cargo of bronzes broken up for scrap. In 1997, an encrusted but intact sculpture of an athlete was found on the seabed off the coast of Croatia. The Aegean island of Rhodes boasted the most celebrated bronze of the Hellenistic period, a 100-foot-tall statue of the Greek god Helios. Produced by a pupil of Lysippus in 280 BC, the Colossus of Rhodes was leveled by an earthquake 54 years later. Fancifully reconstructed by later artists, it survives in Western memory as one of the 7 wonders of the world. The bronzes that survive are more human in nature and scale. Two millennia separate their world from ours. Yet they seem less like strangers than distant relatives. Shaped by the same emotions, ambitions, hopes, and dreams that define our own experience.
This film was made possible by the HRH Foundation.